For Rosa and Raul for singing that song. Um, I'm very glad that Pastor Jim delayed my sermon from 2 weeks ago to this week because I was going to preach about something else. But as I was driving back from Palmer, I was thinking to myself, I had the word Joshua popped in my head, and I thought, well, I could do a sermon about him, but what am I going to do a sermon about on Joshua? And so I started reading about Joshua, and I'm sure some of you may know of the character in the Bible. He was the predecessor for Moses. And I like this story. I always thought Joshua was a young man. I thought that he was, but in the story of Joshua, he gets older and older, and he seems like the youth, and to me, and it seems like he has that courage, you could say, to believe in God. And so that's why I thought to myself, I can have that courage as well, and I can believe in God. And even though I'm young, and even though I can easily be tempted, I still pray to God and believe in Him. And so reading about Joshua, I just, it was very, very helpful. And I think that this message might be also helpful for you. So Joshua, his name means salvation. And his name wasn't always Joshua. Joshua's name means Yahweh is salvation. His name was not always Joshua, though. His name was salvation. And so Moses changed his name to Joshua instead of Hoshea, which was his name previously, and now it is Joshua, meaning Yahweh is salvation. So as I studied more about Joshua, and I'm only going to share a little bit, but he seems like a type of Jesus in my eyes. And I'll share some stories, some very lovely stories, some interesting ways that he believed in God and had faith in God. We have one at Exodus 17. There's a story of Joshua as a general leading a battle that Moses had given him. So Joshua 17, verse 8. Exodus 17, my bad. We're going to read about Joshua in Exodus 17, verse 8. Now Amalek came and fought with Israel in Rephidim. And Moses said to Joshua, "Choose us some men and go out and fight with Amalek tomorrow. I will stand on the top of the hill with the rod of God in my hand." So Joshua did as Moses said to him and fought with Amalek. And Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. And so it was, when Moses held up his hand, that Israel prevailed. And when Moses let his hand down, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands became heavy. So they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. And Aaron and Hur supported his hands, one on one side and one other on the other side. And his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. So Joshua defeated Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Write this for a memorial in the book, and recount it in the hearing of Joshua, that I will utterly blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven." And Moses built an altar and called its name, "The Lord is my banner." For he said, "Because the Lord has sworn, the Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation." In this quick bit, we read about Moses, the man who has been leading the people of Israel since they were freed from slavery. Moses was a good man, a very good man, a very righteous man, but he sinned, and he was not allowed into the promised land, the land that God set aside for the Israelites. Moses was told by God to lead the people of Israel, and as the people had complained to him, he disobeyed God and did not honor him. So he wasn't allowed into the land of Canaan, which is Israel, and he needed someone to take his place. So in Numbers, we can see where Moses will put someone in his place. In Numbers 27, verse 12, I believe. So in Numbers 27, verse 12, the Lord said to Moses, "Go up into this Mount Abarim, and see the land which I have given to the children of Israel. And when you have seen it, you shall be gathered to your people, as Aaron your brother was gathered. For in the wilderness of Zin, you rebelled against my command to hallow me at the waters before the eyes." So there, Moses was told by God that he's going to be gathered with the rest of the people and wasn't allowed into the land of Canaan. And then in verse 16, God said, "Let the Lord, the God of the spirits of all flesh, set a man over the congregation who may go out before them and go in before them, who may lead them out and bring them in, that the congregation of the Lord may not be like sheep which have no shepherd." And the Lord said to Moses, "Take Joshua, son of Nun, with you, a man in whom is the Spirit, and lay your hand on him. Set him before Eleazar the priest and before all the congregation, and inaugurate him in their sight. And you shall give some of your authority to him, that all the congregation of the children of Israel may be obedient. He shall stand before Eleazar the priest, who shall inquire before the Lord for him by the judgment of the Lord, or by the judgment of Urim. At his word they shall go out, and all the children of Israel with him, and all the congregation." So Moses did as the Lord commanded him. He took Joshua and set him before Eleazar the priest and before all the congregation, and he laid his hands on him and inaugurated him, just as the Lord commanded by the hand of Moses. I recognize this because while we were at the committee on Sunday, I noticed a lot of people were laying their hands on people that were voted in, and we prayed about it, and they were nominated. And so I just recognized that. It was very nice. Joshua was inaugurated to lead the people because he was Spirit-filled. God knew Joshua was going to be like a shepherd for Israel, the Israelites, a man who devoted his whole life to serving God, and he was also a general. So he had some background in leading people, but he was fighting the wars even before he became leader. He was sent into Canaan and fought at Jericho and at Ai, and with the battle that he fought with the Amalekites, he demonstrated a level of faith that was very interesting. God told Moses to hold up your arms, and as long as Moses held up his arms, the Israelites would be winning the battle. That's back in Exodus 17, verse 8. In verse 11, "And so it was, when Moses held up his hand, that Israel prevailed, and when he let his hand down, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands became heavy, so they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. And Aaron and Hur supported his hands, one on one side and the other on the other side. So I guess that's a lot of pressure for Moses as he's fighting this fight. He tells Joshua to go out and have this battle. And God, of course, had Moses go up on the hill, and he has to hold his arm out all day, and he has to hold the staff out all day. And eventually, Aaron and Hur decided that they would rest Moses on a rock so that his staff cannot be lowered, because every time his staff was lowered, Joshua would be losing the fight. And so as I read that, I thought, man, that would be very scary. I would almost feel completely useless as I'm out there in a battle, and I've never been in a battle, but I can only imagine how terrible it would be for Moses to be fighting the Amalekites, who are a very rough tribe, and you're losing every single time Moses drops his arms. I would feel useless or defenseless. But because he had faith in God, and because Moses had his arms up, God would fight for Israel. And that's one of God's many ways of showing the Israelites that they can't do it without him. And yeah. So, one of the many few people that made it into Israel, as you read the story, you'll see that God did punish the Israelites for disobeying him, and they weren't allowed into the land of Canaan. But very few people made it. Joshua was one of them. I see that in Joshua's life, he was a faultless man. He was persuaded. I believe that Joshua, I only read the story of Joshua in the book, and so I never had any of that background of him. And it seemed like he was easily persuaded when the other nations, if you go to Joshua, I don't know where it is, but early on in the book, he had sinned. Well, he was persuaded by the other nations as God didn't want them to be. Thank you. Joshua chapter 9, the treaty with the Gibeonites. And it came to pass, when all the kings who were on this side of the Jordan, in the hills and in the lowlands and in all the coast of the great sea toward Lebanon, the Hittite, the Amorite, the Canaanite, the Perizzite, and the Hivite, and the Jebusite heard about it, that they gathered together to fight with Joshua and Israel with one accord. But when the inhabitants of Gibeon heard what Joshua had done to Jericho and Ai, they worked craftily and went and pretended to be ambassadors, and they took old sacks on their donkeys, old wineskins, torn and mended, old and patched sandals on their feet, and old garments on themselves, and all the bread of their provisions was dry and moldy. And they went to Joshua to the camp of Gilgal, and said to him and to the men of Israel, We have come from a far country, now therefore make a covenant with us. Then the men of Israel said to the Hivites, Perhaps you dwell among us, so how can we make a covenant with you? God never intended for the Israelites to converse or to be a part of the other nations. They weren't living for God, and they would be a bad influence on the Israelite nation. So as Joshua had become leader, He did what God said. He obeyed God and went into the land of Canaan, the promised land. And God said, wherever your feet trod, that land will be yours. And also we read about Joshua as a spy. He goes into this land with 11 other people, and he sees these men. He sees that they're way more powerful than them. He's already had this encounter with the Amalekites, that he can't handle the enemies that he fights, but he still has that faith in God that he can overcome them with God's help. And so he brings good report of the land of Canaan. And now here he has become leader, and he's in the land of Canaan, yet the people have swayed him the wrong way. And so Joshua is, in my eyes, still faultless. He just did not pray to God at that time when he should have, and conversed with him so that he doesn't become swayed. It is a huge testament that he made it into the land of Canaan. For me, if I have faith like Joshua, he's a very good person in the Bible, and he teaches me to have faith in God, and I can overcome anything. He'll keep me on the path. He'll keep me from swerving one way or the other, and to really just trust him. And I've noticed that when I don't trust him is when I don't put in the work, and I've said to myself, I trust God, yet I won't pray, and I won't read the Bible, and it's a testament that I don't trust God. And I notice that I'm walking away from him, and as soon as I pray to him, he's got me covered. I have many difficult obstacles in my way, yet they're easily overcome, like Joshua's obstacle of the Amalekites. Moses trusted him with fighting the Amalekites, and he needed to trust God. One thing in our studies in class, what a lot of the time is the interesting ways God has of doing things. And so he always does things in a new way, and it shows you that God is the one that wins, the one that will inevitably be winning the battle for you. I can't defeat these battles on my own, and I know that it's God who does it for me. Amen. And I know that that's what I learned from the Israelite nation, is all of the difficult trials they've won and overcome. And when you read about it, you will see that there are 1,000 different ways God can do things. But whatever happens, you have to trust him. It would be an interesting sight to see Moses on a hill holding his hands up, and every single time he drops his hand, I lose the battle. And yet Joshua still trusted God. I'm very blessed that I was given this story of Joshua. It spoke to me a lot, and I hope it means something to you. He's a very good man, and we studied about him in class a lot, but I never did know that he'd always been there by Moses' side, but there was a reason that God appointed him to lead the Israelite nation. And he points to Jesus. He's a representative of Jesus, and a very good one, just like Moses. And I would say if we can learn to be more like Jesus, and learn from Joshua, and learn from Moses, that we can do God's work with a strong heart and lots of courage. So have faith in God. Read the Bible and pray, because you show him that you trust him, and that's what he needs to help us out. That's a testament to my life. Just whenever I pray and read the Bible, I trust God, and God in the end does help me out over all the hard obstacles. That's my sermon, the story of Joshua. Thank you.